For the latest in strategic affairs, subscribe to our YouTube channel. Click the bell icon for updates.
This is StratNews Global. I'm Amitabh. Revi. On the talking point today, we're looking at India's green hydrogen mission, and our expert analyst today is Mr. Ravi Pandit. A warm welcome to all our viewers who are picking up this stream live, and welcome to those viewers who will watch this later on our YouTube channel. Our expert today, as we said, is Mr. Ravi Pandit. He has been on StratNews Global's flagship annual show, The Catalyst, before, but this is the first time we're having him online. Ravi Pandit, the chairman and co-founder of KPIT Technologies Private Limited. Thank you so much for your time, Mr. Pandit, and welcome to StratNews Global again.
Thank you, Amitabh.
Mr. Pandit, now, the cabinet clearing this green hydrogen mission, which the Prime Minister had announced, almost 3 years back. It seems now like for the first time, their clear financials or their targets and their numbers which have been put out, which gives us a greater sense. But does this really change the long-standing joke about hydrogen? The cliche is, of course, right, hydrogen is the future. But the detractors always say it will always be in the future. It doesn't make sense in the present.
Yes. I think the things have changed dramatically, that nobody can say that anymore. The cliche was that it's the fuel of the future and will always continue to be. So it's not going to be so anymore. So, globally now at least 30 countries have announced their hydrogen missions. So has India. So if you were to look at the total of these countries, and if you were to look at the consumption of fossil fuel amongst all these countries, it's probably 80% of the fossil fuel consumption. So now the time is absolutely there for a move towards hydrogen. And so there are multiple things that have happened, Amitabh. One is, of course, the statement by various countries saying that they want to go for the hydrogen mission. But equally important, I think, is the technology which is now gotten ready. Technology for generation of hydrogen, technology for consumption of hydrogen, not only in the most evident sector, which is mobility, but also in sectors like steel making and others. So we have on one side the missions of various governments, and we have on the other side the technology that goes with it. And I think underlying all of this is this very stark realization that we cannot take climate change as a side issue anymore. It is like front and center right on the table with us. So I don't think that we can now look at hydrogen in a cavalier manner.
Where would you say, Mr. Pandit, is India on this green hydrogen curve? You're saying both technology and government push is coming. Can it emerge as it's being portrayed to be a world leader in both production, utilization, and ultimately export of green hydrogen?
I think we have a distinct possibility of doing that. I come from the field of mobility. I come from the field of transportation. And what really bothers me a lot is that when the first transport revolution happened, which is like the internal combustion engine, when that happened, we were nowhere in the picture. When the battery thing happened, even then, our presence was limited. This was like 7-8 years ago. But I think now we have a very high possibility that we should be a leader in the field of hydrogen, because I think technologies are available with us. Hydrogen involves generation of hydrogen, which can be green hydrogen can come from electrolyzer, which is really related to sunlight, or it can come as a biohydrogen, which is again in some way related to sunlight, because more the sun, more the biology, more the plants and the biomass that you can get. So on the generation side, we believe that we have a distinct advantage. And I also believe that we will have an advantage on consumption side, because this is typically relevant for long distance heavy duty travel. And India has a fairly large extent of that. So one can see hydrogen being used and in road transport. One can see it used in railways, in ships. Now, the government of India is talking about, what inland waterways, it's talking about coastal ships, all of that, I'm certain will go hydrogen way. So I think, in every way we have a chance of being major users. Now, you asked a question whether we could be a global leader on that. Now, the question, the issues to look at is that can we have big enough a scale so that our costs are very low? And this government is talking about large scale hydrogen. And this, there is every potential to make large scale hydrogen from, as I said, solar, because, we get very good light. There is potential for making it from biomass. We also have now technologies which are extremely low cost, amongst the lowest cost in the world, both for generation and for consumption of hydrogen. So scale can bring us there, plus the government's current policies about this, our roughly 20,000 crores kept aside for the hydrogen mission are, I think, an extremely good start.
An extremely good start. Just a message to our viewers, of course, if you do like this video and the subject that we are discussing, do hit the thumbs up icon on YouTube and do share this link as well. If you could just put it into different buckets, if I can say that, Mr. Pandit, in terms of green hydrogen and big industry. Now, how do you see it progressing when you're talking about refineries, fertilizer, cement, steel? Explain how green hydrogen can be a game changer and India is moving towards that.
So, if you were to look at usage of hydrogen, you can look at it as a usage in a stationary manner and a usage in a mobile manner. I believe that a large chunk of usage will come from the mobile manner. Okay, a large chunk of that will come from the mobility industry. So where we are looking at heavy duty or long distance vehicles. If you were to look at stationary use, we see it coming up in steel, of course, because there is a lot of work that is going on direct injection of hydrogen in the steel making process. Okay. And there are now companies in Europe who are using that, and in India we can do the same. Mind you, very shortly, if our steel is not green, our market for steel will suffer. So every Indian steel company is seriously looking at hydrogen as an input to steel making. The same applies to fertilizers or cement, etc., which are really high CO2 generators. So I would put it in these two broad buckets where you can see substantial usage.
Now, talking about mobility, how do you see electric vehicles and green hydrogen technology? I mean, of course, they are within that mobility bucket. There is, of course, two-wheeler, three-wheeler, four-wheeler, and then there's private and commercial. But if you could
Yes.
break that down for us.
Yeah. Okay. So see, I believe that any within the city travel or small vehicle travel, even though it is long distance, will go the battery way. See, because the very clear economics is that if you put in, say, 100 kilowatt hours of energy in a battery, you get almost all of it back. Okay, because the battery can transfer all of that back to the powertrain. However, if you were to put energy into hydrogen, there is generation of hydrogen, which takes some energy. There is conversion of that hydrogen into electricity, which also takes some energy. So obviously the throughput is lower. But when it comes to a city travel, I believe batteries will make more sense. But when it comes to long distance travel or heavy duty travel like trucks or buses, etc., if you have them using batteries, probably they will have no possibility of carrying any payload, because batteries will take so much of space, but more importantly, batteries will take just so much of weight. So obviously a commercial enterprise which runs a bus or a truck would like to ensure that its payload doesn't get reduced. With a hydrogen vehicle, you don't have that problem. And therefore, for any long distance travel, hydrogen will make sense. If you fill hydrogen in a vehicle, it takes the same amount of time that it takes to fill diesel. And you can get almost like 500 kilometers of range on big vehicles. So clearly, if you were to look at the payload economics, if you have to look at the time taken for reloading, hydrogen is, so battery charging takes a long time. Battery swapping is practically not possible for large vehicles. So hydrogen is the only way of doing it. So when it comes to commercial, heavy duty, long distance traffic, hydrogen is the only way. When it comes to within the city, batteries will make immense sense. So I like to look at life like a forest. Okay, in a forest you need a range of trees, a range of animals, a range of birds, and they all coexist. So in my opinion, in all the electrification of mobility, batteries and hydrogen will coexist, and they will have different spheres of influence or different spheres of usage.
So in essence, you're saying they're complementary, they have different roles at different circumstances, and it's not necessarily that transition will go linearly from currently what we are, fossil fuel, to hybrid, to using ethanol, even hydrogen, to electric vehicles, and then ultimately to green hydrogen. That's not how you see it. It's not a linear progression.
No. So see, clearly, I don't see long distance heavy duty vehicles going on batteries. So if you were to look at the recent announcement of Tesla, if you have noticed the video that has gone around, they are talking about using a battery based truck to transport chips. Okay, so chips don't weigh much. Okay, so the weight penalty doesn't hurt them. But if you have to transport any large industrial goods which weigh, and there is a limit on how much a vehicle will carry. If a lot of that is consumed by the battery, obviously the payload cannot be carried. So clearly there are rooms, and I don't think it has to be sequential at all. Both these things can happen simultaneously. They are independent parts. Yeah.
Sure. Just in light of what you're saying, there's a question from one of our viewers in terms of hydrogen, the space that the fuel cells or hydrogen would take up. The question is from Trey Jones, who says, would green hydrogen be stored and transported as a gas, or would it be compressed into a liquid?
So this is very interesting. It's a very, very relevant question. So, you need to think about transport when the point of generation and the point of consumption are away from each other. If you look at typically mobility as an application, and if you look at typically heavy duty long distance travel, you are really looking at travel intercity. So it would be like a decentralized usage of hydrogen, and you would have a decentralized generation of hydrogen, whether by electrolysis, because the energy can be transferred, it can be transmitted without much cost, and you can have electrolyzers at various places who will generate hydrogen, and the same will be loaded onto vehicles. Similarly, if we are doing biohydrogen using either pyrolysis gasification or microbial treatment of biomass, it will necessarily be distributed across the countryside. So you have a very nice situation where you can generate hydrogen across the country and you can consume hydrogen across the country. And therefore the issue of transportation will not arise. Issue of storage will of course be there, but storage is stationary, and there are enough technology for stationary storage of hydrogen.
Again, when you were talking about hydrogen being used for long distance or intercity travel, not intra-city.
Yes.
KPIT itself developed the technology for hydrogen bus. There was, I think, a retrofit bus that was unveiled in Parliament by the Prime Minister in 2015. Your first indigenously developed hydrogen fuel cell bus was put out, at least publicly, I think in August last year. What is, Mr. Pandit, keeping that technology from being adopted at scale?
Yes. So, if you were to look at typically the process through which new vehicle introduction happens, it's a long process. It takes a couple of years at least. You have the initial prototypes, you have some small volume production, you have a small volume sale, and then it gets into a production. So these are the things that take a couple of years. So we are, I think, well on the way of that. So I'm not worried that it's not taking faster. Again, remember, when you are going for hydrogen or even for electrification as a general thing, you are really looking at change of a complete ecosystem infrastructure. So look at it, like when initially when the transportation moved from say animal powered to a vehicle, a diesel powered vehicle, it didn't happen overnight. We had to lay down roads, we had to lay down gas stations at multiple places, and it was a transformation spread over decades. I'm sure when it comes to hydrogen, it is something similar. It may not take many decades, it may take just a couple or maybe 2 or 3, but it's an infrastructure change and things do take time. We went through something similar when industries were electrified, right? Earlier, we had industries running on water mills, and then they got changed to electricity. It also was an infrastructure change, so it's going to take some time.
Again, a message for our viewers. At the bottom of your screen, you see a scroll that will help you join our Telegram channel. That'll give you the latest updates on what we put up on our website, or videos like this one, this interview that we're having with Mr. Pandit. Another question, Mr. Pandit, for you from Clouds and Mountains. How relevant is biogas in the same space as green hydrogen?
Yeah. See, many governments have come up with hydrogen mission. I don't know of any government which has come up with a biogas mission as such. We have to remember that biogas, when it is used, especially in vehicles, it does create pollution at the point of use. One can definitely argue that biogas is carbon neutral because you are the biomass is absorbing carbon and biogas is emitting carbon. Biogas is typically used in an internal combustion engine. An internal combustion engine gives out emissions, and it gives out carbon, CO2 based emissions wherever the vehicle is moving. So that is one issue. Secondly, I believe that biogas vehicle will not give you the same range as a hydrogen vehicle will give you. And the important part is that when you use hydrogen, especially in a fuel cell, all that you get coming out is water. It's the cleanest usage that you can possibly think. So I believe that biohydrogen will finally take over. Over a period, it will take over.
So when somebody like Elon Musk rubbishes hydrogen, is it motivated because he's into electric vehicles?
Yeah, I have tremendous respect for him, but not for every opinion that he has.
Yeah, of course not.
So no, I think for long distance travel, it will not be batteries. We do a fair amount of work on batteries, and maybe at some point in time we can talk about it. But to get that kind of an energy density in a battery is not possible at all.
Again, you alluded to it, but the argument that's given from the other side that the energy content that comes out is less than what goes into making green hydrogen, with some even arguing that it's a waste of renewable energy.
Yes, so that's why I would not advocate hydrogen when it is coming to within the city travel, because batteries clearly make more sense. But batteries don't make sense in long distance travel. And you can't use batteries when you are doing steel making. No, you will need hydrogen in that because that's a part of that process requirement. So there are niche areas and large niche areas where hydrogen can only be used. So it's admittedly hydrogen is less efficient because of conversion to conversion. I mean, you look at it as a situation where you are using electricity to and through electrolysers, you are converting that into hydrogen. Now you are taking that hydrogen, you are putting it through fuel cell and generate electricity again. So there is almost like a 50-60% efficiency at every place, but together it means like 40% efficiency at the most. Whereas in the case of a battery, it is like 95-96%. So prima facie batteries make sense. But how can you put these large heavy batteries on large long distance trucks, especially those which are running weight? So you would see that all over the world, there are trucking companies who are investing in hydrogen all over the world.
Trey has another question for you, Mr. Pandit. Does India have sufficient domestic supply of specialty metals used in production of electrolyzers?
Electrolyzers don't necessarily use a lot of specialty metals. We are not in electrolyzers, but we do a lot of work. As you know, we work on fuel cell. So an electrolyzer is really a fuel cell in reverse, with some change in catalyst. There is not much of an issue in getting the materials for that. And we have to finally remember that in this interconnected world, there would be nothing which we can do 100% in the country. You compare that with a battery, for example. We don't have cobalt. We don't have some of the other materials also that are scarce materials that go into it. But that doesn't mean that we'll not go for batteries, right? We'll still go for batteries. So unless you look at battery chemistries like sodium-ion batteries, which we work on.
Germany has put aside a lot of money and effort towards hydrogen. India has relationships and there are MOUs that have been signed, say, with Germany, with the US, with the Scandinavian countries. How much does that go towards helping everybody learn from each other?
Yeah. So, so I think for a variety of reasons, now almost every country is looking at hydrogen. So clearly, Europe is looking at hydrogen from the perspective of energy security, especially in the light of their recent experiences. And other countries are looking at it from the point of view of pure climate, the climate change. Now, we have this whole COP26, 27, you have funding going into this green areas, etc. So there is economic reason, there is a national security reason. And I think this is a commitment that all of us across the world have to have for our future generations, because we can't have the kind of warming that we are having today. So there is every reason for us to collaborate. You look at countries like Australia, they are looking at, they have vast lands. They are saying they want to be a hydrogen exporter. Quite good, actually. And I trust that even in India, we can do the same. But we also have a huge demand internally, which I don't think many other countries can have. So there is enough domestic market which can give us good scale. We can focus on that. And there was a question earlier that Trey asked. Clearly, a part of hydrogen can be sent through the pipes that we are currently using for natural gas. Clearly, they cannot be used for very high proportion of hydrogen. For a small proportion, we can use them. But maybe at some point in time, in some areas, one can use, centralization of, centralized hydrogen generation and decentralized consumption. But, the clear economics is that whether you are using biomass or whether you are using electricity, you are better off transmitting the electricity or biomass rather than transmitting hydrogen, rather than transporting hydrogen. So that makes more sense.
Trey has another one for you. I think a lot of hydrogen pilot projects are coming up along the coast, but his question is, production of green hydrogen would place further stress on water supplies. Is that true or false?
Yes, that's true. So, if we want to use electrolyzers, clearly you need clean water. And you see, otherwise we'll be using gasoline. And I think it's important to know that water management can significantly increase the supply of water in our country. That we have this monsoons, and at the end of monsoons, a lot of water just goes into the sea. The government of India also has a lot of water missions. So I would believe, secondly, the way we use water in our agriculture is extremely profligate. It's not good. So I think I would not worry about the availability of water at this stage at all, because there is much that we can do on the consumption side or on storage side of water to solve this issue. I think the issue that we are trying to solve by displacing diesel is a far bigger issue than the other issues. See, because as far as we are concerned, import of diesel constitutes such a large part of our total imports. It also makes us, from a strategic perspective, kind of insecure. It pollutes our cities, and it's not the best of the technologies. So I think displacement of that has to be our first priority. We can solve all the other problems on the way.
When you were talking about earlier about hydrogen and longer distances making more sense, and especially when it's carrying cargo, you mentioned it in terms of ships and trains and planes, aircraft as well. I think this hydrogen mission talks about heritage trains, but how realistic is that in terms of ships, railway, aircraft? When do you visualize
Okay,
that actually
so
being feasible?
so if you were to look at yes, yeah, if you were to look at ships, Norway is already running prototypes of hydrogen fuel cell based ships. Hydrogen based ships make immense sense. I'm very certain that ships will go the hydrogen way for sure. Coming to railways, wherever there are already railway lines which supply electricity, clearly there is no room for hydrogen. But there are areas even in our country where trains are run on diesel. Those are the areas very clearly hydrogen trains can take over. As you must have read, Germany is now running a trial of a hydrogen rail. So it's bound to happen. Okay, we will do it. See now, currently, for example, there is a pilot project going on in I think towards Darjeeling, where there is no electric train. I'm sure there are such areas where there would be hydrogen. Thirdly, on the planes, now there are 2-3 companies across the world who are looking at hydrogen-based planes. See, the trouble is that hydrogen suffers from a brand crisis. See, every time we talk of hydrogen, we think of either the hydrogen bomb or we think of the Hindenburg. Okay, yeah. and therefore hydrogen plane, when all of us have seen the picture of the Hindenburg, right? But now I don't think that's the issue anymore. And so I believe planes will also go hydrogen, because if you were to look at the contribution of aeroplanes to the CO2 generation, it is not insignificant. So I'm sure it will happen.
And finally, if you want to put your thoughts on pricing, Mr. Pandit, in terms of, I think it was the U.S. Energy Secretary who did that 1 for 1 for 1. That's $1 for 1 kilogram of hydrogen within 1 decade. How realistic is that? And that's in lieu of a question, if I can find it, from one of our viewers, Venkat, who says, how does the cost of making green hydrogen compare with other renewables?
Yeah. Okay. So, as I said, green hydrogen can be made either by electrolysis or from biomass. If you were to look at the current cost of hydrogen coming from electrolysis, one is talking about anywhere between $6 to $10 per kg. Okay, and a lot of that is the electrolyzer cost, and also, of course, the cost of electricity. The cost of green electricity is coming down, and we are now talking about 2 rupees, 2 rupees 10 paise per unit, etc. At this cost of hydrogen, in a typical long distance vehicle, this will be about 15% premium over the diesel today, without considering any governmental subsidies. If you were to look at green hydrogen coming from biomass, the cost of that dispensed hydrogen can be anywhere between $3 to $3.50 per kg. At that rate, this would be 15 to 20% cheaper than diesel today. Okay, that is as far as the hydrogen itself is concerned. If you have to look at the fuel cell currently on a small volume, people are talking about $1,000 per kilowatt. On a large volume, people are talking of $250 per kilowatt. And the DOE says that finally it should come down to less than $50 per kilowatt. I think in India, with Indian technology, we can make a fuel cell at a much lower scale in the region of $300 to $400 per kilowatt. I think it is very doable in this country now, which would make hydrogen transportation quite comparable with the transportation by diesel.
Clouds and Mountains has a question. How much should we orient our green energy strategy based on present coal usage rather than comparing one green energy against another? Will it help in reducing our energy risk due to imports?
Yes. So it is admittedly so that as a country, we are dependent a lot on coal. And clearly, we'll have to figure a way out of coal in not too distant a future. And there are technologies which can be used for that. I believe that if one can come up with low cost carbon capture and storage technology, then we can use coal to make blue hydrogen. And if what is remaining is pure coal, it can be used in a whole bunch of industries. I think that's something that we must necessarily focus on. And I believe that's a good area to do research on. Uh, the other area that is coming up very quickly is this whole issue of fusion. Till now,
Mm.
fusion was really done by governmental agencies with relatively low speed. Now there are large private sector investors who have gotten into it, and maybe in another 2 decades' time we will see fusion coming in, which would make electricity available very cheap, abundantly, which can also make hydrogen very cheap. I for one, I am certain that we will see a massive change in this energy consumption in the next couple of decades. This 211, in my opinion, is very doable. I believe that in a few decades' time, we will look back and say that for 100, years, why did we use such a dirty fuel for our transport? You know, and see, so there was a time when you couldn't walk in the streets of New York because horse was the only way of transportation, and the streets were full of horse shit and smelling very bad. And then cars came along. And I'm sure people said, "Why did we use horses for travel within the cities?" We will have something similar coming up when it comes to the current, fossil fuel usage and the new energy usage. And I would think the usage of coal is not incompatible with this. I'm sure we will have technologies which will convert, that CO2 that comes out of that into a break of C and O2. It will call for some investment in technology, maybe plasma technology, but that's very doable.
Mr. Ravi Pandit, again, thank you so much for sharing your time, your experience, and your expertise in explaining to us and all our viewers very simply, which is something that is actually a very complicated subject.
Thank you. Thank you very
In
much.
fact, Mr. Pandit, Trey has another question. First he says, he or she, thank you so much for hosting a very informative discussion. And then he says, does Sentient Lab host tours for green energy enthusiasts?
Shortly, Trey, shortly.
Shortly. So there you have your answer. And thanks again, Mr. Pandit. Thanks
Yes,
to
thank
all
you.
our viewers who've engaged with Mr. Pandit on this live stream. This you can, of course, always help support us financially. There's a UPI QR code that's flashing on your screens. There is a link in the YouTube descriptor as well. This is the Talking Point on StratNews Global. I'm Amitabh Revi.